Greetings and welcome to our daily walk through the scripture for April the 9th. Your readings today find you finishing out Deuteronomy chapter 34 and starting Joshua chapters 1 and 2. You read Luke chapters 13, 22, all the way through the end of it, and then you go Luke 14, go to verse 6. And then you have Psalm 79, 1 through 13, and Proverbs chapter 12, verse 26. Just like we have been doing, we start a new book of the Bible today, so we're going to take some time to focus on that. And so today we're going to look at the book of Joshua. Now, the book of Joshua is about, it's actually about the conquest of the nation of Israel into the promised lands, sometimes called the patriarchal lands. Very fancy, but basically it is what is going to establish what we now know as the kingdom of Israel. Now, no one really knows who wrote the book of Joshua, though there are parts of Joshua that were clearly written, or at least instructed by Joshua to be written by him. But timing in terms of when it was written, it's a little bit up for debate. But there's no doubt that the events that took place somewhere around 1400 years before Christ, so around 14 to 1390 BC. And the conquest of Israel is going to take a number of years. This is not something that's going to happen just in a matter of days. Now, there's a few things that you can look at in the book of Joshua, and there are some important aspects of it. One of them is God's providence and God's carrying out his promises finally to God's people. So you're going to look at that and you're going to see that theme played throughout the book of Joshua. Another thing you're going to see is that there's a lot of violence in Joshua. There are a lot of battles, a lot of things like that, and some parts of it that might seem very uncomfortable. And some people might look at this and say, well, does this mean that God approves of warfare and violence and those kind of things? You can't read the book of Joshua like that. Remember, this is a book of history, and also it's a book where you have to look at the context of the time period. And this was right around the Bronze Age, and Bronze Age was a very violent period in history. There were a lot of conquests. There were a lot of battles. There were a lot of things that happened during then. It was a very different time from today. Battles were very commonplace and very necessary in a lot of ways. And so as you read Joshua, try not to read it necessarily through the lens of today. That can be a very dangerous thing when it comes down to it. Now, there's still some themes again that we're going to look at. And this is really ultimately about God fulfilling his promise and using Joshua for it. Now, the person of Joshua, he's a very interesting individual. We first learn about him in the book of Numbers when Moses speaks about Joshua kind of coming in as his aide. Originally then, his name was Hoshea, which just meant salvation. But then at some point, his name was changed to Joshua, which means the Lord saves. And so Joshua was very much carrying on the mantle of Moses. Now, one of the other interesting things about Joshua is that when you read about leaders in Israel, and I'm talking about appointed leaders, Moses being appointed by God, David, Solomon, Rehoboam, all those other kings of Israel that are going to come by, Joshua is the only one that maintains a steady character. In other words, you can look at Moses and you can see that he was a murderer. You can see that he was a sinner. As a matter of fact, he was kept from going into the promised land because of a sin that he committed. You can look at all of the kings and you can look and see that they were actually in many ways some pretty rough individuals. But Joshua continues to remain faithful all throughout the book, and even at the end of the book of Joshua, he gives some incredible exhortations and challenges to the people of Israel. And so Joshua is a man of great character. And so you need to make sure and look at that he remained faithful to God no matter what the circumstances were. And so again, now the Israelites are about to cross over. Where we see Joshua start is we see them start on one side of the Jordan River. And they're about to cross over and enter in and begin the conquest of Israel. Now, you're going to see a series of skirmishes. You're going to see a series of promises. You're going to see a lot of those different themes occur throughout Joshua. But again, this is all about God making good on his promises And really, honestly, God being faithful, you're going to see some really cool miracles, some really cool stories, and you're going to see also how God prepared the way for the people of Israel, how God used their 40 years to set the stage and prepare that, and in some ways make it a little bit easier for them to get into the promised land. Okay, that's kind of our conversation on Joshua, and so you'll read the first couple of chapters, crossing over the Jordan, which is a really cool story, really incredible thing, sending out the spies. You're going to see strength and courage conversations, and then we're going to get into crossing of the Jordan and entering into the promised land. So we'll do that later.